Welcome back. Now, Uganda's post-independence history has been interspersed with conflict, bloodshed and military coups. But efforts towards truth and reconciliation largely appear selective in choosing the victims and perpetrators. Now, on Talk of the Nation tonight is Jaffar Amin, son to former President Iddi Amin Dada, an exponent of truth and reconciliation. Jaffar, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm humbled to be here.
I'll get right into the discussion. In an interview with the Observer newspaper, you said that Africans are vindictive and retributive. But the same African culture has some form of reconciliation and reparation justice mechanism. What is the premise of your claim?
You know, we're a patriarch society, and we believe in showing strength. Africans tend to believe the more you show strength, the more honored and respected you are. So throughout history, even going back to biblical times or Quranic times, and even if you go through the oral history of Africans, you find a very strong patriarch character, whether it's Moses, Muhammad, or strongmen like Shaka Zulu. There's always that impetus that you show strength by being firm. So that has actually collectively been the norm in Africans, and the revenge factor tends to be there very strongly whenever somebody feels that one tribe has attacked them. So the ethnicity problem tended to dwell on all African, or even post-independence Africa. So that vindication comes out in tribal wars and sectarian religious wars that we've seen, that actually from the inception of Uganda. And it's that premise that gave me the fact that, look, at what point would somebody be courageous enough to say sorry? And for me, that's the defining factor.
And we'll get to the issue of saying sorry a little later on. You have on several occasions come out to dispute accounts about your father, Iddi Amin's chronicled atrocious, if I might say, history. Is this a son's defense of his father, or do you actually have evidence contrary to what is written in history? Or can we even believe what history says about your father?
You see, history tends to be written by the victor, and that has always happened in history. But there are defining factors about my father based on issues of being a mass murderer, issues of cannibalism, issues of insanity. I'd pick on those three. Let's start with the insanity issue. He was strong enough to say straight to the Israelites, what you're doing against the Palestinians is wrong, and he spoke it in a tragic term when he referred to the 6 million Jews that were incinerated. The reaction against that was an insane statement. Considering the facts that happened in the history of... The second one was the issue of cannibalism. It dwelled on a brother of mine called Moses. Now, Moses is alive. He was born in 1969. He lives a very quiet life. And he doesn't want to talk, but he's still alive. But an incredible thing happened just at the moment when they claimed he had been sacrificed. The information arrived that he had been sacrificed, and there was a funeral gathering in Busembatia, where his mother comes from the royal clan of the Baisemena. Dad collected the son and the sisters, and they drove all the way to Busembatia, and they found a funeral fire with the mournful gathering of his relatives from the maternal side.
That must have shocked him.
It shocked the parents, not the young boy. He was a small boy. But the grandfather sees a spitting image of his great-great-grandfather, and they checked. You know how the children have injuries that are very well known by, let's say, the nanny. There was one called one lady who knew the child so well. She came and checked for those discerning scars and said, no, but this is Moses. From mournfulness, they turned to ululations of happiness. That's a clear. To date, everybody still believes that Moses was basically eaten. The horror of that thought. But he's alive. The issue of mass murder, there was selective information coming from the people he had ousted. Okay. Unfortunately, UPC to date still considers that the country was betrothed to them. I'm just giving a political angle. Yeah. So that animosity also meant that throughout his reign there was also negative information going out. Now, an important factor to that is a gentleman called, he's in the Makerere University, and he actually does research, Fred Guedeco. His father was a victim during my father's time. But to date, everybody believes that my father killed his father. But he has come out and said, I've checked through the information, and it's actually about 10,800 deaths, not the purported 300,000 or 500. Even today, some people are claiming a million. So those three factors are there. But I'm not defensive. I simply say something went wrong. And I have the courage and conviction to come out and say, and go out and meet victims of repression, of absolute power. My father was the only person to date who actually wielded absolute power. And that means a lot. It means you have a soft underbelly. They can blame you for everything.
Anything and everything. And
he was ruling, it was martial law. The equivalent of what happened in Japan post 1945. The same thing with Germany. Uganda. It seems the pains of democracy or a new nation you go through. But I'm not condoning what happened. I'm simply saying if you rule by military law, it means you open yourself up to a lot of accusations.
You recently asked for your family to be forgiven as the family of Iddi Amin. Why now? Or is this something that you have sort of been trying to do and you didn't quite have the...
I got actually the inspiration in two ways. My brother, Major General Taban, was a head of about 6,000 fighting group, the West Nile Bank Front, in Congo and Sudan. When his father died, he left 22 tons of weapons and came home. I was absolutely furious at an individual level. And I kept asking, we went to the night, we used to call Nile Hotel, Nile Mansions. Yeah. And I simply said, why? He said, there's nothing to fight for, Dad is dead. I went back to the office, I was still angry, I was as an administrator in a courier company. But I started reflecting on that point. The second point was when his grandfather, actually Taban Amin is the grandson of Obote. That's the most ironic thing about this. Helen Echi was a niece to Obote. So I went all the way to Okokoro to bury the father of the nation. When I got there, they read my name because I'd signed the visitor's book, the condolence book. And they said, in the interest of reconciliation, we wish to recognize the presence of the son of Iddi Amin. There was an incredible ululation. When ululation is negative or let's say dangerous, it comes in a very chilling manner. Yeah. But the ululation of welcome is incredible. There were probably 100,000 mourners that day. That set me off thinking about it. And then we did an amazing thing with the BBC for two weeks. It was a radio documentary. I went all the way from Koboko to Butiama, and we did an incredible reconciliation with the family of Nyerere. So that set me off. And I've been constantly doing this. Right now I go around regionally with the Jubilee Network. In fact, it was actually sanctioned when Museveni stood at Nambole and say sorry for the past misdeeds of former leaders. You know, every position in society, well, from a local chief to the head of state, you wield amazing power and influence in your status. And we go around saying sorry. In some areas, I stand in front of 30,000 people. Then you get about 40 families coming with all the tears. It's an amazing.
Must be very emotional for you.
It's incredible. Sometimes people ask me, why do you do it? In Islam, there's a saying called waladun saleh, ayadullah. A son, a good son, stands and upholds the name of the family or the parents. And if you go to the Christian side, they say honor your parents. It's one of the commandments, yes, I believe. So that's basically what I'm doing. But I believe through the interreligious council, we can heal a lot of the wounds of this country, because believe you me, religious people are the most respected and trusted people in this country.
I totally agree. A lot of negative stories are told about your father. What are some of the positive things that you can tell us about your father's regime?
I can only pin one thing. It has a negative connotation to it. It's called economic independence. Africans are we have an incredibly low self-esteem, but it was primarily put in us during the colonial and the slave process. You dehumanize an individual, you break the will of an individual. That's what colonialism did to us. And it seems the only thing my father's purpose in life was to come and unshackle those chains and remove the yoke. Can you see those oxes doing the plowing? Can you imagine a human being? That's how the whole of Africa has lived. And he's harangued for it, and he's talked of negatively about, but that's the only thing I want you to focus on. He had the courage and conviction to say, you are capable. This is your country. And he actually paid compensation for what he's claimed to have plundered.
Okay.
They claim he plundered from the 50,000 British Asians who owned 90% of commerce and industry, but he actually went through placing it under the custodian board, and he actually went through a process of paying approximately $1 billion. But nobody talks about that.
Just very quickly, what is the one thing you remember most about your childhood?
Wow, there's a kaleidoscope. I've actually bothered to write a book, and it was published in 2010, but the love. My father was a very mothering individual. The only example of him is Obama. You know, children who have lived with their mothers have an incredibly sensitive persona around their children or progeny. Today I find negatives talked about him, but right then there was the caring and the mothering, the love. He was strict, but was very...
As any father should.
Yeah,
is expected to be.
You know, he used silence with children. He was not the bowler. He was a quiet type. He had a quiet, brooding presence. But that love, despite the fact that we are 60 children...
He had enough love to go around.
Yes, yes. But I think he was reflecting on his childhood.
On his own childhood.
Yeah.
Your last words?
I would really I'd wanted to read out a statement, but would it be?
Sure, just quickly 1 minute. You can read out just
all right, please. Because we're heading towards our Ramadan, and this is something I really felt I really wanted to do.
Sure.
Thank you. In the name of God, the most gracious, most merciful, fellow citizens of our beloved country, Uganda, I humbly take this moment of reflection to bring to your attention the following highlights in our history. Our father of the nation, His Excellency Milton Obote, was forgiven. He was given an honorable burial in Uganda. Honorable Wakasisi was pardoned. Honorable Agre Awori of the Foba was forgiven. Colonel Omari of UPA Teso reconciled with the NRM government. Honorable Musa Echweru of UPA was captured red-handed, but however was forgiven. Today he is a minister. LRA officers of the Konyi have and were forgiven by African justice mechanism, where cultural, religious leaders through our Omatoput ceremony were prepared to forgive even Konyi if the Juba peace talks agreement was signed. If we look back, Iddi Amin and Dada, for 24 years, between 1979 and 2003, lived a simple, quiet life in Saudi Arabia. He actually never participated in armed conflict post-1979. He died a humble pauper and was buried in an unmarked grave in our simple Islamic cultural way. I hereby plead as one of the sons and children of the third head of state of Uganda. Our humble plea is for his soul to rest in eternal peace. We have no political ambitions so far, and we all want to live a humble and peaceful life in our beloved homeland, Uganda. We salute the President of Uganda for having ushered in peace and political stability over the past 29 years, so that all Ugandans are free to enjoy in pursuit of happiness. In keeping with this spirit of peace and reconciliation for a new and better Uganda, I, Jaffar Amin Dada, appeal for forgiveness from all citizens of Uganda for the soul and spirit of my late father, Alhaji Iddi Amin Alemi Dada, and seek goodwill from every Ugandan, and in the same spirit of reconciliation to God. I wish, as we head into the holy month of Ramadan, to appeal to His Excellency, our President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and the NRM government to unclench our fists for an open hand of peace and forgiveness, because reconciliation and tolerance is the cornerstone of President Yoweri Museveni's government and leadership over the past 29 years. I say all this with sincerity for God and my country. And I'm very humbled that you've given me the chance to at least reiterate what I've been doing all across the country.
Thank you very much.
And I'll continue, and I ask others to join us.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Jaffar Amin, talking truth, peace and reconciliation. We will take a short break and return with the latest in NTV Week in Sport. Thank you for joining us.
Brought to you by
Double Mint.